Daf Yomi, Tractate, Avodah Zarah, page 62a. Avodah Zarah, Daf Samach Bet, Amud Aleph. We are starting the fifth and the final chapter of the tractate called Sofer et HaPoel. Starting with the Mishnah on the top of 62a. Hasoich es a poela sozim ma b'yainesech sachar yosu. Sachar ila sozim malach acheres zar b'shem aloi evelicho bis shem yainesech mkom l'kom. Sachar id muta hasoich es a chamo. Lo yele yainesech sachar asu. Sachar esh v'leo. Aval b'shem nech goy b'kino aliyah. Sachar muta. This is the Mishnah. In the case of a non-Yehudi who hires a Yehudi laborer to work with wine used for an idolatrous libation with him, his wage is forbidden. Meaning, it is prohibited for the Yehudi to derive benefit from his wage. If the non-Yehudi hired him to do other work with him, even if he said to him while he was working with him, transport the barrel of wine used for a libation for me from this place to that place, his wage is permitted. The Yehudi is permitted to derive benefit from the money. With regard to a non-Yehudi who rents a Yehudi's donkey to carry wine used for a libation on it, his rental fee is forbidden. If he rented it to sit on it, even if a non-Yehudi places jug of wine used for a libation on it, its rental fee is permitted. Zok the Gemara. My time is chayv asu, ilim chayv yaines chasu v'no, schar nami asu, harei ole v'chila yakerem yasu v'no. The Talmud says, in the first case of the Mishnah, where a Gentile, a non-Yehudi, I should say, hires a Yehudi, caught me off guard there, where a non-Yehudi hires a Yehudi to produce wine used for a libation with him. What is the reason that his wage is forbidden? If we say that since it is prohibited to derive benefit from wine used for a libation, his wage is also prohibited. That is difficult. There are the cases of orla produce, meaning produce grown during a tree's first 3 years, and diverse kinds planted in a vineyard, from which it is also prohibited to derive benefit, and yet we learned in the Mishnah in Kedushin 56b that if a man that if a man sold this produce and betrothed the woman with the money received for it, that she is betrothed. Evidently, money gained from a forbidden item is not itself forbidden, as otherwise the betrothal would not take effect. Ela, rather, perhaps the reason that the wage is forbidden is since the wine used for a libation transfers to the money its status as an object of idol worship. The Gemara challenges, but there is the halacha on sabbatical year produce, which transfers its sanctity to money with which it is redeemed, and yet we learn in the Mishnah, should we eat? 8.4. With regard to one who says to his laborer during the sabbatical year, here is this dinar I give to you. Gather for me vegetables for its value today. His wage is forbidden. Meaning the sanctity of the sabbatical year produce is transferred to the wage, since it is as though he has purchased sabbatical year produce in exchange for the dinar. But if the employer says to him, gather for me vegetables today, without mentioning that it is for the value of the dinar, his wage is permitted, as he merely paid him for his labor. This should apply as well to the case of the wine used for a libation. Amar Rabbi Abahu Rabbi Yochanan, Kenasu shikansu chachamim v'chamarin v'yenesech yenesach ha'amaran chamarin mai Titania ha'chamarin shehayu oisim racham beperes shviz schron shviz. Rabbi Abahu says that Rabbi Yochanan says this is a penalty that the sages imposed upon donkey drivers and with regard to wine used for a libation. The Gemara explains with regard to wine used for a libation, the penalty is, as we said, that the wage of one who was hired to work in the production of wine used for libation is forbidden. With regard to donkey drivers, what is this penalty? The penalty is, as it is taught in the Braita with regard to the donkey drivers, who are working in the transportation of sabbatical year produce, their wage is sabbatical year produce. Ma'aschon shviz, ilem lehavin lahu, sechar miperos shviz, nimtze ze poireach ovo miperos shviz, ve'atoira amra, le'achla lo yeschayra. The Gemara asks, what does it mean when it says that their wage is sabbatical year produce? If we say that we give them their wage for their work from sabbatical year produce, the employer consequently is paying his debt from sabbatical year produce, and this violates that which the Torah states, and the sabbatical produce of the land shall be for food for you. Leviticus 25, verse 6, indicating that this produce is designed for food, but not for commerce. Ve'ela de kadosh, secharan b'kedusha shviz, umi kadosh, ve'atanya oimer lepoyin, elach dinar zel ulikot, li yerek hayom, scharo mutar. And if it means that their wage is sacred, with sanctity of the sabbatical year produce, is that wage in fact sacred? But isn't it taught in a Mishnah that with regard to one who says to a laborer, here is this dinar I give you, and gather for me vegetables today, his wage is permitted. But if he says to him, gather for me vegetables today, for its value, his wage is forbidden. The case of the donkey drivers is clearly similar to the former case, where the value of the dinar was not mentioned. Amar Abaye le'oilam yevinan le'sechar mipera shviz udikaka shelach le'ochla ve'lo le'sechara tiaven hele v'tzad heter k'ditinan lo yomar adam lechavero. Abaye said actually Rabbi Yochanan's statement should be interpreted as saying that we give him his wage from sabbatical year produce. Let's go back a little bit. I'm not sure I read the previous paragraph, so I probably did, but I'll read it again. If it means that their wage is sacred with the sanctity of sabbatical year produce, is that wage in fact sacred? But isn't it taught in the Mishnah that with regard to one who says to a laborer, here is this dinar I give to you, and gather for me vegetables today, his wage is permitted. But if he says to him, gather for me vegetables today for its value, his wage is forbidden. The case of the donkey drivers is clearly similar to the former case where the value of the dinar was not mentioned. And then we read for sure the Hebrew next, Aramaic. So the English is, Abaye said actually, Rabbi Yochanan's statement should be interpreted as saying that we give him his wage from sabbatical year produce. And as for that which appears to pose a difficulty for you, that the verse designates such produce for food, but not for commerce, that can be resolved by explaining that one gives him his wage in a permitted manner, meaning as a gift rather than as a wage. This is as we learned in a Mishnah, Maaser Sheni 3:1, that a person should not say to another. Now we turn to 62b. On the top, with the words ha'aleh. Ha'aleh li peiros. And actually, the ha'aleh are the letters of ha'olah, which was my gematria for the day. Ha'olah is gematria hamalach hagoel. Ha'aleh, which is 135, the way it's spelled in the Torah. Ha'aleh li peiros halalu li Yerushalayim lechalek. אבל אומר לו, אלה נאכלו משתויס ומשכליים, לא יסתנזל לזה, ואז משכינם. Bring this produce, designated, as the second tithe to Jerusalem for me in exchange for a share of the produce of which you may partake in Jerusalem. This is considered payment and is tantamount to conducting commerce with the tithe. But he may say to him, bring it to Jerusalem, to eat it and drink it in Jerusalem, as long as he does not specify that is his payment. And once in Jerusalem they may give one another unrequited gifts. This indicates that what may not be given as payment may be given as a gift, and therefore the donkey drivers may be compensated with sabbatically of produce. לעולם דקדוש קדוש שביעס ובקרקע שילח פועל לא נפש אגרי לא כנסו רבנן חמרן נפש אגרי כנסו רבנן בהו ומתניתין חומרה דיין נסך שני. And Rabbi says, actually Rabbi Yochanan means that the produce with which the drivers are paid is sacred with the sanctity of sabbatical year produce. And as for that which poses a difficulty for you, with regard to the halacha of the labor cited in the Mishnah, which states that his wage is not sacred, that difficulty can be resolved as follows. There is a distinction between labor whose wage is not great, and therefore the sages did not penalize him by decreeing that his wage is sacred, and donkey drivers whose wages are great, and therefore the sages penalize them. And with regard to the Mishnah that deems forbidden even laborer's wage, in the case of one who produces wine designated for libation, the stringency of wine used for libation is different, and it is treated more stringently than sabbatical year produce. Mahu מימרינן כיוון דסור החמור כדיין נסך שכר אינם יעשו או דין רהוי בטומאתו kilo in brackets kilo, it's kilo in brackets of sechor yamiki. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If a non-Yehudi hired a Yehudi to work with him in the production of nondescript wine of non-Yehudim, meaning that wine was not used for libation, was that halacha? Do we say that since the prohibition of deriving benefit from nondescript wine of non-Yehudim is as stringent as the prohibition of deriving benefit from wine used for a libation, his wage is also forbidden? Or perhaps should we reason that since the halacha, with regard to its capacity for imparting ritual impurity to one who comes into contact with it, is more lenient than halacha with regard to wine used for libation, the halacha with regard to its wage is also more lenient? Tashma הרבה סתמיינה יהבו לחיטה באגררת לקמת רב חיסדא אבל איזיל קילינו וקברינו brackets bekivri and brackets bekivri, I'm sorry, parentheses bekivri, brackets bekivri. Come in here a resolution. It is related that there was a certain man who rented out his ship for transporting nondescript wine of non-Yehudim, and the non-Yehudim gave him wheat in payment. He came before Rav Chisda to determine the status of the wheat. Rav Chisda said to him, "Go burn it and bury it in a graveyard." Evidently, payment for working with nondescript wine of non-Yehudim is forbidden. ולהם עלי בדרינו, עטו בהולידי תקלה, ולקלינו ודבדרינו, דירמה וזבלבו. The Gemara raises objection to the method of eradication of the wheat in Rav Chisda's ruling. But let him say to the ship owner, scatter it. The Gemara responds, if he scatters it, people might be caused a mishap by it if they find kernels of the scattered wheat and gather them for eating. The Gemara challenges, but then let him burn it and scatter it. Why should it be buried? The Gemara answers, people will fertilize their fields with it. The Gemara challenges, but let them bury the wheat in its unadulterated form. Didn't we learn in Avodah with regard to instruments used for imposing capital punishment? The stone with which a condemned person is stoned, and the tree on which his corpse is hung after his execution, and the sword with which he is killed, and the scarf with which he is strangled, all of them are buried together with him, as it is prohibited to derive benefit from them. The Braita does not require that they be burned before they are buried. Hasam, tikakavre bedin machacha milta, teharugi betininu, hakalo machacha milta, emar, inashkanavi tayikalacha. The Gemara answers there, since they are buried. Getting back to the Talmud. Where were we? Right, that objects that were used for a capital punishment, you just bury them, you don't have to burn them. Not that you could burn a stone, but I'm saying tree or, scarf you could burn. Sword, I don't know if you could burn, but, whatever. So the Gemara answers, Hasam dekakavri bedina mochamilta deragabetininu hachalo mochamilta imar inashkana ve'atigevaracha. The Gemara answers there, since they are buried in the court graveyard, the matter is clear to all that these were executed by the court, so everyone knows that using the instruments of execution is prohibited. Here, the matter is not so clear to all, as one might say to himself that a person stole the wheat and brought it and buried it here, and he might thereby come to use it. Devei Rav Yanai yazfi peresh v'yes me'aniim upa'u leho mishminis atu amore Rav Yochanan amar lehu yehutein avdin. The sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai borrowed sabbatical year produce from the poor and repaid them in the 8th year. Others came and said this to Rabbi Yochanan out of concern that by doing so they violated the prohibition against engaging in commerce with sabbatical year produce. Rabbi Yochanan said to them, they're acting properly, as it is not considered commerce. Mutau. Titania nasala velai baleo. Baleo nasnad mutau. Interesting case. In the case of an etnon, etnon zona. Etnon zona, Arizona. And in the corresponding case concerning payment to a prostitute, a zoina, for services rendered, it is permitted to sacrifice such an animal as an offering. Although the Torah prohibits the sacrifice of an animal used as a zoni's payment, a woman for hire as payment, see Deuteronomy 23:19. In a case similar to this one, it is permitted, as is taught in Braita. If If a man gave the zoni payment, but he did not engage in intercourse with her, or if he engaged in intercourse with her, but he did not give her payment, it is permitted for her payment to serve as an offering. No sanlo, v'lo pshito, kevan delo ba'aleh matana, yalme, yahivla, v'to ba'aleh v'lo nasala, halo yahivla, v'lo min, kevan delo nasala, mayet nanamuta. The Gemara discusses difficulties with the wording of the Braita. Okay, the wording of the Braita. If he gave her payment, but he did not engage in intercourse with her, isn't it obvious that it is permitted? He gave her money, but he didn't do the deed, so he just gave her something. Since he did not, so it's not the payment for intercourse. It's not the payment for, shmashstitution. Smashstitution. Since he did not engage in intercourse with her, it is merely a gift that he has given to her, and there is no reason for it to be forbidden. Why does the Braita need to state this? And furthermore, with regard to the case in the Braita where he takated in the case, he did engage in the Zach with her, but he did not give her payment. He didn't give her anything. And since he did not give her payment, what is the meaning of the statement, her payment is permitted? If he didn't give her payment, then what is the payment that she's giving? The one answer is rather this is what the Braita is saying. If he gave her payment, and afterward, meaning after some time elapsed, he engaged in intercourse with her. Or if he engaged in intercourse with her, and afterward, some time elapsed, he gave her payment is permitted because the payment is not given proximate to the intercourse. Oh, now I understand. This is also the halacha in the case of borrowing sabbatically a pladus, meaning paying for it after time has elapsed is not considered commerce. The Gemara asks if the bride is referring to a case where he gave her payment and afterwards he engaged in intercourse with her. Then when he engaged in intercourse with her, did you continue?